Welcome to the Heart of Money podcast, where we discuss the impact that money has on every area of your life and where you can learn to make smarter money decisions. Join our conversation as we discuss our past experiences, talk about how to make better money management choices, and in the end, make a commitment to being weird. Hey folks, welcome back to the Heart of Money, episode 66. I'm your host, Austin Black, joined shortly by my co-host, Bob Wessler. And before we get started today, I want to ask you to do two things for me. Number one, be sure to leave a 5-star review on the show to let us know what you like about the show, what you enjoy hearing about, what you want to hear more about, and how we can make the show even better for you. Number two, be sure that you subscribe to the show so you get every episode every Friday morning on your listening device. We would love to have you join us each and every week. So be sure and subscribe, leave a 5-star review. And I'm really excited this week because we're going to bring on a special guest, Miss Ashley Harwood. Ashley is the Director of Agent Growth for 3 Keller Williams offices in the greater Boston area. She began her real estate career in 2013 and built a 6-figure business as a solo agent before launching her own coaching program, Move Over Extroverts, in 2018. Today, we're going to have a fun conversation because Ashley has been all the way across the country and back, as she grew up in Michigan, now lives in Massachusetts, but has been on both sides of the country, on both coasts. Has had a lot of life experiences and some very unique lifestyles that she has been a part of, that she has embraced, that she has learned from, and that she has evolved with her. So it's going to be a really fun conversation as we talk about the different phases of wealth and of living and of what you really focus upon at each stage in your life, what matters the most to you, and sometimes how we can be more with less. So I'm excited to have her on the show today. So let's jump right into my interview with Ashley Harwood. Hey folks, how would you like to learn the number one secret to winning with money in your marriage? Sounds pretty attractive, right? Well, there's a reason why most couples do not achieve financial success, and it comes down to 3 main areas that are problems in their marriage and with their money. If you want to find out what these 3 problems are and learn how to fix those, then sign up for the free training I have at freedommoneycoach.com/success guide. This video training is going to walk you through the 3 keys to getting on the same page with your spouse around money. It's called the Marriage and Success Guide, and I know that you're going to learn how you can actually start winning with money with your spouse, improving your money and your marriage all along the way. So head on over to freedommoneycoach.com/success guide, sign up for your free video training, and learn how to get on the same page with your spouse today. Ashley, thank you so much for being on the show today. Welcome to the Heart of Money. We're glad to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I know we've been having some different guests on the show as of late. Usually we have focused on coaches, on thought leaders, on people just that kind of are in a space of expertise and have something to share. But we've been having some really unique guest episodes as of late, and folks like yourself who aren't necessarily in a true, marriage or relationship coaching scheme or even in the financial side, but have just a really unique story and experiences to share that are very relatable. So I'm excited to talk with you today. But for starters, just walk us through kind of your background and a little bit about what you do and how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. So my background, I grew up in Michigan outside Detroit. I studied English in college and then became a real estate agent about 9 years ago and worked in real estate full-time for about 6 years. Moved to Massachusetts, did a couple of years in Los Angeles, and then came back to Massachusetts. And now I work in a coaching and training capacity within the real estate industry. So it keeps me very busy, also very fulfilled.
That's awesome. And I know you've had a lot of experiences over your life. I think whenever we talked before, you said you have lived several lives because of just the different things that you have done. Give us just an overview of what the past 10 to 15 years of your life has looked like, kind of the different experiences, places you've been, how you got to be to where you are today.
Yeah, I've lived a lot of different lives. I've lived like the kind of cookie cutter middle class, Like that was kind of my upbringing. 2 parent, 2 kid household. I've also lived that same kind of life where I am the leader of the household. Like when you're in the house and
Yep.
I actually drove by my house the other day. It was pretty weird. My old house I used to live in, and like the picket fence kind of vibe. I've lived in cities. I've lived in crappy apartments. I've moved across the country three three times at this point, and I've always like just tried to make decisions based on where I think I will be happiest and where I can make the biggest impact. And so I haven't been too afraid to make some big drastic life changes over those, past 10, 15 years.
Yeah. I know myself having not necessarily moved across the country, but I have moved a long ways from home before for a short time and realized I didn't like that. I had to come back to being in the same proximity of a lot of people I knew, but you haven't gone, basically all across the country. I think you've been on the East Coast, on the West Coast, you've been several different areas throughout the country. And you mentioned, having that, finding out what makes you happy in that, and just really kind of following your passion, your pursuit. Um, what is one of the things that over the course of that time, whenever it comes to just your mindset, to your financial management, the different pieces that have all played into your decision making on that, how has that changed and allowed you to be comfortable in having that diversity of experiences and going from, like you said, the modern 2 person, two child, all the way to having gone from away from everything and now back to where you are now? What's been the change just in how you make those decisions, how you handle that, how money's been a part of that?
So there's been a lot of factors. A couple of the main ones have been just really changing my expectations of what life is, quote unquote, supposed to look like. I'm using air
Mm-hmm.
quotes. I don't know if people are going to see the video on this. Um, like setting aside what you're told that you're supposed to do and the path that is like the more traditional path, that isn't necessarily for everyone, and if it's not, that is okay, and it actually could be really great for some people to take other paths. So that's been a big part, was just setting those expectations aside. And then another piece of it was, specifically when I lived in Los Angeles, I was able to see so much extreme poverty in the United States that I hadn't really seen before, at least not to that extent. Um, so that was extremely eye opening and really changed how I thought about money and material wealth. And I do think, accumulating wealth is important for the good that you can do with it.
Yeah.
But just like accumulating things for the sake of having the most things is not, that used to be very appealing to me 10 years ago. And now I'm like, that's dumb. Like, what's the point?
So, having gone from those various experiences, and I know it seemed like as we get older in life, we tend to change the different mindset that we have around what we need, what we have, how much money we should make, just all the different dynamics around our our lifestyle, our job, our family, our living, everything seems to be able to morph and adjust and modify depending upon where we are in that time. Give me some examples around how that changed for you, depending upon where you are in each of those sections. Because I think just our environment is so um, impacting on how we think like that.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is moving a lot. That really, every time I move, I have to think about, what do I want to take with me? The
Yeah.
more I take with me, the more expensive and the more pain in the butt it is to move
Right.
everything. So there's this clearing process that happens, and it's been happening for me pretty often, like once a year for the past maybe 5, 6 years, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
So I have this really nice opportunity to go through every single thing that I own and decide, do I want to keep this? Do I want to give it to somebody? Do I want to sell it? Like, how important is this to me? Another thing I've been thinking about lately is the difference between investing in something that will improve your quality of life versus something that is strictly for ego.
Mm,
And I have
yeah.
an example of this. So, an example would be um, bedding,
Mm-hmm.
picking out nice bedding, picking out something that's soft and comfortable. That's an improvement in your quality of life versus I'm just going to buy this bedding because it's a fancy brand. And if somebody asks me where I got it, I'll be able to
Uh-huh.
tell them it was from this fancy store. But it's not, but the quality is not the same. It doesn't matter. Maybe that's
Right.
not a good example, but does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, because
It's
it's
like buying
something
it.
that, yeah, your difference is going to be in not just the looks, but in the function and the use of it. So I think that's very applicable. Bob, I know whenever you used to be down in Texas, and when you've moved from Missouri to Texas and then back, is there anything in Ashley's story about just those things that you can relate to in your moving in previous years?
Yeah, I made that move twice from Missouri to Texas, back to Missouri, back to Texas, back to Missouri. Um, Two different points in my life. And the first one, it was very minimalistic that I had, 5 roommates in a fairly small area. We had triple bunks. So we really just had a cubby of sorts, an oversized cubby. So you could have a couple pairs of shoes, clothes, and that was about it. So that trip, the majority of my stuff stayed in Missouri, and I spent the year down there with very minimalist amount of stuff. And then when I moved back after college, I would say it was minimalist again because everything I owned was stolen. So that made it for a very quick and easy not having anything trip. I think that started out with everything I owned I threw in trash bags and threw in the car because it was, hey, you need to get down to Texas tomorrow. And so I rented a place for about a year and then got used to my surroundings and job and started accumulating things. And it took a while to get all those things back to Missouri, which then sat in storage for a long time. So I can fully understand the idea of being minimalistic in what you have and having to cart it around. And, the fun part of moving it back from Texas the second time was I had English Mastiffs that I brought back. So we had multiple trips, and they basically got the back of the SUV to themselves while I was pulling a trailer. So, yeah, definitely an adventure. And I can imagine going completely across the United States back and forth would be. Did you drive that, or did you fly and have your stuff sent?
I flew and I had my stuff sent, and I had my cars shipped back and forth too, which is a whole other deal.
Oh yeah.
No kidding.
So I went about it with just toting it from Texas back to Missouri. And that was, on a normal trip, it could be about 12 hours. And I think my last trip was over 17 with a dog that never got out of the vehicle. So she just was not comfortable with the surroundings. And we got home and she snipped at the other one and went and fell asleep. So I, on the other hand, after being up for 17 hours and double fisting 5-hour energies, did not sleep. So yeah, it was an experience that is all coming back to me now. Thanks, Austin.
You're going to fly next time, I can tell.
Oh, I'm just not going to move. That's all. But those are dangerous words to say too. So,
right.
Well, I will tell you, my next move, I have every intention of not having to move all my things and rather just starting to acquire more properties and furnish them separately and keep them as rentals.
Yeah.
That's smart. I know whenever we talked before, and you've kind of alluded to this here a little bit, but at each stage of your life, you experienced a different perspective around money, around things, around the need for it. And we kind of had a chance to talk a little bit about how your perspective of money changes depending upon how much money you have, to be quite honest with you. You know, if you're going on that minimalist venture, then you don't even think about how much money you have, and you don't care if you got a lot of money. That's you're focused on minimal, versus you get all the way to the end of the other spectrum where you've got some money, you have some wealth, some accumulation. You know, you're more focused on growing that. Take me through a little bit those different phases that you have been a part of, and how, depending upon where you were, what you had to do, you either did care about the money or you didn't care about the money, and how just that mindset impacted your decisions and where you went next from there.
I will say I've always cared about the money. It just presents differently.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point it presented as I care about the money because I care about my ego and I care about how other people perceive me and how I can show off.
Mm-hmm.
At other points, I cared about the money for having a big savings account and having security in a very uncertain world. At other points, I've cared about accumulating money to purchase investments
Mm-hmm.
and assets that will grow and continue to grow without me having to have my hand in it as much. So, you know, wealth building vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where I'm at right now. So it's always been about the money. It just changes, like how I perceive it changes, and how where I spend that money changes. So yeah, I will always love a designer bag. I'm not going to say that I don't, because that won't change.
Right.
But rather than trying to fill up a 3,000 square foot house with the nicest things, I'd rather buy properties and have a portfolio of things that are actually creating more money, so that I can go and do other things that help other people. Like, that's the end goal, is to have enough money under my control that I can help more people.
Mm-hmm. I think you said before, whenever you were living out there, was it LA area? Am I correct on that location?
Yes.
There was you were in a certain area there that really shaped your mindset at that point around material need, financial need, what was important, what wasn't important. Can you share that story and kind of how that shaped your perspective during that time?
Yeah, so I was in the city of Los Angeles. I started out in the Arts District, which is about 2 blocks from Skid Row. And it was a very up and coming area until like April of 2020, then not so much.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved to the west side, Marina Del Rey, and then I ended up in Culver City. So I lived a couple different places in Los Angeles. And there's so much homeless. It's such a problem. And these poor people just live on the street in a tent, not having anything. And they're like, I don't know, it's just wild. If you've never seen it, it's really, take a trip to LA. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like everyone should see this, because it's very impactful, and you want to go and help everyone, and there's different ways to do that, but it definitely changed how I thought about what I actually need. Like, if people are able to live in a variety of different ways, like, why do I need to spend $8 on a coffee when I could give $8 to a person who's homeless and they could have, meals for the day?
Yeah.
Like, that's a very interesting example, because there's the other side of the coin is there's so much insane wealth in LA. You have $10 million properties on the beach, and there's a bunch of tents in front of it, and it's like the disparity is just right there in front of your face, and it's really interesting to see and very sad.
Yeah, that's incredible. I know I've been places like, New York and Nashville and DC, and it's just the contrast. You wonder how there can be so much contrast in one place like that. And it really does make you just think about some of the simple things in life, and you kind of reframe, like you say, what's important, what matters, what do I need to have, and what do I need to do differently. I think that's something that we should probably all experience at some point, just understanding the diversity that comes from your background, your situations. Bob, have you ever seen anything down those lines, or kind of experienced that kind of contrast within just financial means in one area?
I'm going to say I've never seen anything to the extent of Skid Row. When I was in banking in Texas, it was right after or shortly after Hurricane Katrina, where a lot of people were displaced and moved from New Orleans, and primarily New Orleans, but then relocated to Baton Rouge, and then also to the Metroplex area of Texas. That I could say that a lot of the people that would come into the branch that I was working didn't have a whole lot, and it was more of I worked at a bank that was very score driven, and the people that were displaced were not wouldn't qualify for a lot that the bank had to offer. Mm-hmm. And so it was and even at that, the people that were displaced tended to come in groups and settle in groups, and the areas that they lived, it was primarily apartments, and the areas just were run down very quickly after they settled there. And I don't know what the time frame was, but I remember that basically government monies ran out, or they never got any, and then it just kind of was, well, this isn't ours and we're not taking care of it and we don't care, and then they just left. But I didn't see a lot of homelessness per se. It was just very low income housing areas, and going from decent shape to poor shape within a matter of not even years, but just within 12 to 18 months.
Yeah. Well, Ashley, I know whenever we talked before, your story and just your experiences made me think back to something I had I want to say invented, but I've kind of maybe taken the concept and put my own twist to it when it comes just the money mindset. And I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this, because I've kind of figured out that there's three kind of main phases that I think people go through in how they think about money based upon where they are. Whenever you are, I'll use the word broke just by the case of you don't really have much more. I mean, you're a paycheck to paycheck lifestyle. There's really not a whole lot there. And at that point, it seems like, whether you have chosen to be minimalist or whether that's just the situation that you're in, the thought of getting out of that seems like a really big ordeal. Because all you can think about is, where's the next check going to come from? Can we cover the bills? Are we going to have enough to get by this month? You aren't even really thinking to 12 months down the road. You're thinking of how do we get through today and this week, and you're very limited sometimes in your mindset and your thought process in what you can focus about, think about, plan and prepare for. And then you hit the next phase where you maybe aren't, well off necessarily, but you have enough to cover the bills. You have enough to put some in savings. You're able to think a little bit longer term from the standpoint of now we are planning for the rest of this year. Are we going to be able to save up to buy another car, or save up for a vacation, or put some money in retirement? And you're in that comfortable spot where you still have everything that you fully want, but you're at least able to breathe and relax and be confident and comfortable where you are. And that starts to kind of liberate your mindset to think longer term, to not be pressured into this box of, what are we not able to do, and to think about what can we do. And then you get to that last phase where you actually begin to have your income grow some wealth. You begin to have your retirements, or your retirement investing begins to grow. You begin to forecast those longer term objectives and goals. And that really puts you in this position of dreaming and living and freedom and the ultimate security, because you're now in complete control of where you're going. But your mindset and your thought process through each of those different phases, I think, is dictated by how much money you have, or just what your view of what the money is going to do for you at that time. And you kind of have to, I think, push yourself to advance to that next level, and not just rely upon your money to do it, but also your mindset to do it, in order to get to the second phase and the third phase and actually have that security and that freedom. Bob, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, as well as Ashley, just kind of how you can relate to those different concepts around money, and if that's something that you have experienced as well. Bob, what do you think? How does that line up with how you have seen people respond to money over their life?
A couple things come to mind. One, in looking at how you view money, how important it is. From one standpoint, when you don't have a whole lot, looking for, from a standpoint of living paycheck to paycheck, you're really focused on where you're putting your money, how you're spending it, if you're paying attention to where you're putting it. I think as you move on into a position where you're starting to accumulate money, becoming more stable in spending habits, or progressing through a career, you're not going to be as focused on the money itself, but knowing where it goes. And I think when you get to the point that it is more of when you can fund those retirement accounts, when you have your insurances covered, when you're in a position that money is no longer something that is a focus, it's now back of mind because you've got all your staples or your bases covered. And I think to build on your comments or your framework, it's kind of like the adherence of a team, or how you create a team. But you would start with storming, and then you would move to norming, and then you would have performing. And I'm absolutely stealing that from a team's mindset. But just when you don't have much, you're storming because you're trying to figure out how you're going to make ends meet. And then when you get to a point where from Austin, what we've talked about before, creating a budget, identifying where your money's going, trying to live within the construct of the budget, you're starting to normalize your procedures, normalize your spending habits. And then as you're able to save more, invest more, whatever in those aspects, you're getting more to the performance area of money, and it truly becomes a tool rather than something you have to have just to survive.
Yeah. Ashley, what are your thoughts on that concept, and have you experienced something similar to that throughout different stages of your life?
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on this. One is, a lot of this is impacted by who we surround ourselves with. Have you guys heard that your net worth can be predicted by the net worth of the 5 people closest to you?
Yep.
I'm sure you guys have heard that. So I really do believe that, and I see it play out. I spend time in a lot of different groups of people, and I hear the conversations that happen in these different groups, and they're very different from each other. And you can kind of tell who are going to be the people who are very successful, and who are going to be the people who just kind of live their life and do their thing. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You just have to decide kind of which group you want to be part of. The other piece of this is the way you initially say it, it sounds kind of linear. Like you start here and then you go to here where you're struggling less, and then you're able to build. And I do see that play out in a lot of people's lives. But I also see people who their trajectory is all over the place. I mean, my trajectory has been somewhat all over the place, not like crazy extreme, but a good friend of mine who's an investor in real estate, he has earned and lost millions of dollars twice. Like declared bankrupt. He talks about this publicly, so I'm not sharing anything confidential, but gone bankrupt twice, lost millions of dollars, and made it back. And now he's like on the upswing again. But for someone like that, the ups and downs aren't, I'm not going to say they're not as scary, because I'm sure they're very scary. But you just get the sense of, okay, well, I've been here before. I can build it up again.
Yeah.
No. So it's it's interesting. And I'm sure part of it is also, upbringing and how you were raised and those conversations you had with your family or you heard your parents have. I'm sure that has an impact as well.
Mm-hmm. I think comment that you made there is very important, because you've got to know that you, if you go back to that point, you've got to know that you can come back, to the good side again. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the whole concept, because if you feel like you're always going to be in one spot, then you're never going to leave that one spot. But if you have the belief that no matter what is happening right now, I could change that and I could go back to a good spot, or I could, even if I haven't been there before, I know I can still get there. That forward momentum, forward progress, I think is really the catalyst for whether it's a swing back and forth or starting, from the scratch and moving forward. But you're right. That there's people that go from nothing to great back to nothing. I mean, Dave Ramsey, I'm a big fan of him, and he has that exact same, story going from, I think he was 26 years old whenever he, first went bankrupt and lost his millions. And now he's gone to the bottom and gone back to the top again. And, is much more wealthy now than he ever was back then. And just that mindset that you are not going to stay where you are unless you choose to stay where you are. And I think that's kind of something that, as you shared your story, I really see an important piece in that. Even if you choose to go back to the minimalist cycle and you choose to not have to have the money, even though the money is always going to be there, the money is always important. It's not the necessity. You're choosing, like you said, the bedding that's going to be more functional versus the high dollar name brand bedding or the bag or whatever it ends up being. But then also knowing that you have the potential to then go back if you want to the other side of that, and to have more income, more wealth, more focus on how the money works for you, and not keep yourself in that box. I think way too many people keep themselves in the box of their current situation without realizing what the opportunity is. How have you guys maybe experienced just that concept within stuff? Do you feel like people stay in a spot, or they more actively move forward on their own destination?
So it depends who I'm talking to. I see both. And one of the trends with the people who I see staying stuck is not changing up who they're talking to and not changing up where they're experiencing things.
Yeah.
So I see this a lot with like a smaller town. Maybe somebody doesn't ever leave there and they're just having the same conversations with the same people. And there's really it's not their fault. Like you don't know what you don't know. So that's kind of where I see that happening. That's stagnant. And I even see, unfortunately, some situations where somebody listens to, say, your podcast and their mind is opened. There's a lot more information available now. And then maybe they go back to their group of friends and say, hey, I just heard about this amazing new concept. Have you guys heard about this? And their friends shut them down because they've never thought about it like that. So it's really important to like surround yourself with people who are of that same mindset, whatever mindset that is for you. If you're a growth-minded person, you got to go find people who are the same way and find those rooms and those groups of people to be in. Because otherwise, you're just going to be banging your head against the wall, and it's really hard to do any of this solo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing that comes to mind is comfort zone, and the idea of a growth mindset. Somebody that's wanting to stay in their comfort zone is not going to branch out in anything. And it sounds like for the person that tries to grow and they're around the people that have their own comfort zone, they're going to squash that every time because they don't want change. I think, Austin, we've had the conversation in a couple of podcasts now that the idea of the linear thought process of success and always moving up and to the right. And it doesn't look like that. I think we all have this thought, or at some point in our lives have the idea that I'm at point A and point B is somewhere in the general direction up and to the right. And really point B is a long squiggly spaghetti line that you might not even go to B. You might go to C or D. And B might fall off to the wayside because over time you realize that really isn't your goal and that's not what's important. But that takes time, it takes maturity, and it takes a mindset that is growing. Because like you say, a smaller town, somebody might not ever desire to leave, and A to B might be 2 blocks away. But in other cases, it could be on the other side of the world and back, or wherever, or it could be a new place every couple of years. I just think a lot of that depends on where you start and where you're going. And I think the idea of who you surround yourself with is so powerful from the standpoint of not only do you just determine net worth by those 5 people, but your outlook on life in general, and identifying, being very specific and intentional about who you surround yourself with to determine who you will be like or where you want to go in life. And how that can be affected by the people you surround yourself with.
Yeah, and I know you, Bobby, and I talked before about just this importance of having those right people in your life, having that close group, and how they can really dictate your thought pattern, your actions, your behavior, everything else. Something else that I think that we don't talk about enough, and it's kind of a tangent off of this, but I think it's still applicable, is just even your own family and the people that you grew up with, that, your parents and your siblings and your grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins, the whole mix of them. There's such a diverse set of backgrounds and sometimes even beliefs within our own family that, and especially actually, like you say, coming from a small town where some of those families that the kids never leave, everyone just grew up there, stays there. That's the way that it is. You maybe have one cousin that goes off somewhere else and then comes back, and they're different. They're noticeably different because now they think differently, they talk differently, they have a different set of perspectives, and that can be a real challenge, I think, even just within those family units sometimes, especially if you come from a background where, maybe money wasn't talked about a lot, or it wasn't something that, your family wasn't an affluent family. You grew up, maybe with a lower middle class background or something like that, and then you had the opportunity to go and actually have success. It's really difficult then to still have those same conversations around money, around lifestyle, sometimes even without feeling like you're being judged with your family, because there's just a lack of understanding and mindset and sometimes acceptance there. So I think, we talk a lot of times about the friends and the colleagues, but sometimes I feel like even just our own family can be a difficult scenario. And other times it can be a positive, if we have family members that have gone away and are maybe that mentoring to us, that sometimes we have a hard time relating to them, but we can learn from them and we can grow outside of our comfort zone. So I think that's also another unit that people can sometimes get discouraged by, but it's also the opportunity to not limit yourself to what you grew up with, but also have the opportunity to pursue other paths, other lifestyles, other moments in your life. Um, Bob, I think that this is such a fun concept to talk about. And Ashley, I'm really glad that you were able to share some of your stories around just money and mindsets, and the fact that you have, honestly, you've done a lot, seen a lot, lived a lot of different lives, like you said, and you're at the point now where you're focused on that wealth building, on taking all the lessons that you've learned and the experiences that you've had and applying that to your future growth. What's one thing that you could leave with listeners to encourage them on how they can continue that momentum with money and have the right mindset and be comfortable with understanding money regardless of the phase of life that they're in right now?
Just one thing is tough, but something that came to mind as you were just talking about families, and I hope it's not too controversial to say, but I really believe that if there's someone in your family or your friend group who is extremely negative and not supportive at all, like maybe they don't get the privilege of having as much time with you. Like maybe you don't talk about this with them. Like if they're dragging you down, you gotta cut some cords so that you don't get totally dragged down. And I see that. I'm fortunate. That has not happened in my family. My family is very supportive, but I see it a lot. And it's hard. So that would be my piece of advice, is if you're finding yourself getting dragged down, then it's really up to you to do something to not allow that to continue.
Yeah.
Would you guys agree, or am I off the rails?
I very much agree, and I think sometimes that's probably the hardest relationship to separate is your family. It's easy to not talk to a friend, but sometimes your family, they're there regardless, and if you've got negativity there, that's definitely a boundary you have to set up. So I completely agree, and being prudent and wise in that manner. Well, this has been fun, and I am really glad that you had a chance to come on and share your story, share your experiences, and the wisdom. It's always great to hear other perspectives from our guests, because the great thing about podcasts, about money, about life, is everyone kind of has their own angle, their own viewpoint, their own lens, and there's a lot of commonalities that always come to the surface, no matter what your background experience is. And I think today was another example of that. Ashley, where can folks connect with you, find out more about you, maybe even work with you in your business and coaching, and just learn more about what you're doing?
Sure. So I'm on Facebook, and my website is moveoverextroverts.com. That's my side business. It's a training company for real estate agents who are introverts.
Perfect. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today, for being a part of this show. We're glad to have you, and we look forward to connecting again in the future sometime.
Thank you so much.